going to call it to order, take attendance, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, Jim, and you hand it over to whomever is appropriate. Okay, so calling the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Community Oversight Board. It's a training meeting. Today is June 21st. I'm going to start by taking attendance. So if people could just say here when I call your name, that would be very helpful. So David Smith.
Here.
Okay. Jim Miller.
Here.
Gary Coffey.
Here.
I'm here, Lisa Ortiz. Julie Evans.
Here.
Okay. Anika, who I don't have everybody's full names. I apologize. Give me a second. Anika Montgomery. Does not appear to be here. Sasha Ridley. Also doesn't appear to be here. Martine Ennis Osario. Also doesn't appear to be here. And we know that Gary Dean unfortunately can't make it. So whether or not we have a quorum, we do have a quorum. So I'm excited that we're going to kick off our trainings. And as always, huge thanks to Jim Miller and everybody on the Arlington County side who's helped to make this happen. So I'm going to pass it over to Jim to kick us off. Jim?
Thank you, Lisa. And just a quick admin notes. So hopefully everyone had a chance to watch the pre-recorded videos, which kind of sets the stage for us prior to this one. And as mentioned, you'll see those for the next few weeks. And big shout out to Julie. Thank you very much for contributing to the oral success to Community Oversight 2-pager along with some FAQs. Lisa, I sent that over to you and Gary for a review, and we can get a chance to talk through that and get that out to everybody else, which will give you a much better understanding of what that path forward will look like for the next few months. But really a big thanks, and of course open to feedback. We'll see how this works. No doubt we're packing a lot in during these 3-hour training sessions, and with that, stop talking and be happy to turn this over to Captain Chamberlain.
Hello, everybody. We're going to start this evening out with Chief Penn, and then we will follow up with our operations division.
Good evening. I think I had a chance to meet most everybody here over the weeks. But just for anybody I haven't met, my name is Andy Penn. I'm the current police chief. A short bit about me. I've been with the county 30 years now. I started here shortly after college and have done I've done all my professional career here. I've had the opportunity throughout the years to work in all 3 divisions of the police department. I spent a lot of time as an investigator. I was in the homicide unit, both as a detective and a lieutenant. And I've been in our internal affairs section 2 different times, once as a sergeant and then once as the captain of internal affairs. So I feel like I've had a chance to do not every section within the agency, but most. So I've been very fortunate, and certainly consider myself fortunate to serve in this role now as the 8th police chief of Arlington. Definitely the most exceptional part of my professional career, because, you know, I say publicly a lot, and I believe it, that, you know, ACPD is a exceptional police department, but at the same time, we recognize that there's always room for change and improvement, and it's our job as leaders to be looking for those areas and be very intentional and proactive when we identify areas where we can be better to do that, to make change and grow. Just so everybody knows, this is Deputy Chief Darren Cassidy, who's in the room with us. He's the operations commander. You probably saw his video sometime over the last week, but he's joining us tonight, so help answer any questions. I'm going to go through a lot of material, and I'll certainly leave time at the end for questions, but my suggestion would be is as you have questions during, I would just shout them out, because I think the more this is a conversation and we talk about topics while we're on them, I think it's probably going to be the most valuable to you. So, you know, I don't know if there's a certain protocol because it's a public meeting or if you can just start shouting them out. I'm fine either way. Whatever works for you works for me. So a little bit about the police department. You know, we've been in existence since 1940. You know, that's a long time and there's a lot of change. I can tell you in my time, you know, everything has changed dramatically in the police department as well as in policing in general. And, you know, I'm very happy with where we are now. I just think this is an opportunity for us to be very introspective and look at what's next for Arlington. I briefly went over at one of your meetings the organizational structure of ACPD, but I think it's important that we start there again with just a few more minutes. You know, there's chunks of the police department divisions, is what we call them. So there's the Office of the Chief, Operations, Community Engagement, Systems Management, and Investigations. I think they are, you know, what's in them is what makes sense to be in them. The Office of the Chief is probably the smallest division because it's, you know, the Office of Professional Responsibility, Captain Chamberlain's group, and me and our information and technology folks would serve all of public safety. The largest division of the police department is the operations division. That encompasses all of our patrol section. So there's 6 different squads, 2 day work, 2 evening, 2 midnights. It includes our special operations section, who I know you're going to hear from these folks later tonight, and our tactical operations group, which, you know, is everything that's the highest liability things for the police department, the civil disturbance unit, the SWAT team, our canines. Years ago, that used to be, each one of those was sort of an ancillary duty for a captain. But, you know, those are areas where we actually need a command level official to really, that be his or her full-time job, because, you know, there's a lot of law, there's a lot of training, and there, you know, it's important that we have somebody that's really focused primarily on just that. All of our field training occurs in the operations division, another huge part of what happens, since we'll talk a lot about staffing and hiring in a little while, but we are keeping our FTOs as busy as we can with new folks. The community engagement division it's new. When I was appointed chief, it was important to us to, you know, recommit to community engagement. We as an agency have done community policing since the late 90s. It's taken a host of different forms and fashions. There were district teams, CB pop teams, neighborhood teams, but this is the first time that we've had an organized division with a deputy chief heading it to be very intentional and proactive about reaching out to the entirety of the Arlington community. I mean, honestly, I think we've done a good job throughout the years of engaging regularly with the organized groups, the civic associations, the CivFed, the groups that are organized. I think we have an opportunity now to keep doing that, but go beyond that and get to where people are who don't go to those meetings. A lot of folks don't go to those meetings. So this is an opportunity to really get beyond their traditional groups and make sure that we're at least extending our hand to every part of the Arlington community. If they want to engage with us, that's great. The more voices and the more we work with everybody, the better off we're going to be. I mean, another thing that is important to me, and I say it pretty regularly, is I honestly believe that we're at our very best when we're working in partnership with the community. We're policing together. It's not us policing the community. It's us working collectively to, you know, make Arlington the safest place that we collectively can. So that's the community engagement division. It's broken up into 3 parts. First is regular outreach, traditional outreach. That's a lot of the civic associations and, you know, organized meetings. There is the business outreach. Obviously, a fair part of the Arlington community are our business partners, so it's important that we're engaging with them as well. And one of the things you'll hear about in the training is the Arlington Restaurant Initiative, where, you know, for those who are familiar with Clarendon, you know, it comes with its own challenges. It's a lot of nightlife in a pretty small area. And years ago, it had gotten to where, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, it had gotten to where we were having to put, you know, 18-20 officers every Friday night and Saturday night just in Clarendon to keep things reasonably calm. And, it's clear to us, and it was then, and it remains, that you don't try to arrest your way out of that kind of a problem. That's really through the Arlington Restaurant Initiative, which was born by a former corporal who came forward with this idea that we all thought was really, really important and really different, was to build the relationships with the bar owners and the business managers, and let's come up with collective goals. Where are we trying to go? How do we help each other? How do we move this forward together? And, we wrote draft policies for them, told them what to expect from us. We continue to offer a host of different training, but in the exchange, it's a constant back and forth between the police department and these business owners, as well as other county agencies. And, through not an incredibly long period of time, that needing 20 officers was cut in half, and things are just as calm as they were when we had 20 officers there. So, that's an important part of the business outreach portion of CED, is really forming these relationships. We do accreditation for nightlife, and it's really just best practices, standards for the businesses who want to engage in that. And we've gotten a very positive response. I think it's been incredibly helpful. It's certainly been a great partnering opportunity. And the desired result was achieved, where we could reduce the number of police we had to have there and things remain just as safe. So great work from the business outreach group. And the final section of community engagement is the youth outreach. With the school board voting to not have SROs in the school this year, it was incredibly important to us to make sure that we were proactive in trying to maintain our relationship with the young people across the community. And how do we continue to engage with our youth? So that group is primarily focused on just that. I'm trying to think of the divisions. Systems management division, that's everything that's not traditional police work. That's where HR is.
Sorry, could I jump in and just ask one quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Who is in charge of, you said that this was the first time you had a deputy chief heading community engagement. I think this is so incredible. And like exactly what you said, at the best, we're a partnership with the community. We're just starting to think about what our community outreach efforts should look like. And we certainly want to synchronize and build on what you guys already have. So
Yep.
If there's someone we could coordinate on that specifically, that would be a huge help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'll be with us in a little while. It's Deputy Chief Wayne Vincent. So systems management is everything that's not traditional policing. It's where the budget is, procurement, evidence, human resources training. Yeah, but it's all the stuff that without you can't do anything. So incredibly important part of the agency. We are a little unique that we have a grant position in that division that really focuses primarily on, hey, Wayne, focuses primarily on, come in.
Yes,
This
sir.
is Deputy Chief Wayne Vincent. We were just talking about your division, so I thought you should meet us.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. I look forward to
Hi there.
speaking to all of you. Let me stay.
And the final is the criminal investigations division, which is exactly what it sounds like. We have a traditional investigations group, which are, for people crime, property crime. We have a homeland security section, as well as an organized crime section, which is the traditional vice and gang type work. So that's the overlay of the divisions of the police department. I just felt like it was important to start with that, and important to highlight that the community engagement division is new. It's only been around 1 year, but I think it's an important part of the conversation moving forward. I think we have some slides, right? So an additional thing that we did when I was first appointed chief was, to me, it was important to hear from both the police department ourselves, as well as the community. And, we spend a lot of time and we focus a lot on best practices in policing. But I think it's equally important to focus on the values and expectations of the community we serve. So for a period of, a few months, so I think most of last summer into the fall, we hosted a dozen or more meetings throughout the community. And then we also did the same within every work group in the police department with the goal of asking 3 questions. The questions were, they're what's on your screen. And it was really just to get people's input and, you know, critique, and then talk about the future. So I thought I would just summarize some of the comments. They sort of were in groups of information, what we got. We offered an online opportunity too for the community members. So in the where are we doing well conversation, and let me just say this, with the slideshow up, I can't see everybody anymore. So if you have something, just speak up because I won't see if you wave or anything.
Thank you. We will.
Okay. At where are we doing well as an agency? Some of the things that were repeatedly commented on were our community engagement, high quality work of our staff, well-trained professional officers, and a very fast response time to calls for police service. In the conversation about areas where we can improve, again, we see there's a request for increased communication and engagement opportunities. So that ended up in both categories. More focus on crime and traffic enforcement, and increased patrols in neighborhoods, parks, and commercial areas. And for the future focus, the things that were mentioned most frequently were police staffing, career opportunities, and morale and well-being within the agency, retention of officers, and that conversation led into pay and compensation and career opportunities, addressing the changes in the crime trends that have occurred over the past months and years, remove police from mental health issues and other incidents that do not require a police officer to be there, and continue building relationships with all parts of the Arlington community. So while, you know, none of it's earth-shattering information, I think it was reaffirming to what we had been focusing on and what we had been talking about. And this was sort of as we were, you know, the police practices group had already completed its work, and the external review by Hilliard-Hines on a host of our policies and our practices. You know, I felt like, I don't know if you've seen the Hilliard-Hines report. It's on our website along with a document that highlights what we've completed so far in the areas that we're making change. But for me, I felt like, you know, it certainly pointed out some areas for us to, you know, make some changes and modifications. But I felt like it was overall, very reaffirming of what we were doing and the direction that we were going.
Chief, this is David Smith. I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Julie said, I mean, your outreach is really impressive. I am glad to see that, and I think it's really valuable. So, and I've also read the Hilliard-Hines report and really been impressed with many of the responses that the police department made to those recommendations. So my question was, how did you go about identifying who to talk with in terms of conversations with the chief? Was that whoever wanted to show up, or did you sort of say, you know, let's go to this or that particular area of the county or particular community group?
So we wanted it to be open to the entirety of the Arlington community. I mean, we certainly had conversations with some of the organized groups, but the focus of that effort was we picked areas in geographically different places all throughout Arlington in different times a day, and, you know, and really publish that through press releases, social media, follow-up social media, because we really wanted it to be something that you didn't have to know anybody. We wanted people just to, whoever would come, wanted to come and share their thoughts. We wanted everybody to have the open access. So it was really pushed just wide and public.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, I think we're going to go through some of that as well in terms of figuring out how to do our own outreach, as Julie mentioned. So your experience there is really valuable.
Sure, we're happy to follow up more and get you information if you want it.
Yeah, I had
Thank you.
family members not just attend those conversations, but, you know, reach out to me after, you know, the Community Oversight Board announcement was made to say how impressed they were with how many there were, you know, how many different places there were, the level of engagement personally, and also the information that was shared. So I, you know, think that that's an extremely effective tool, and I'm really, was really excited to hear all the positive feedback. And I'm interested to learn more. And again, I'm sure this is something we'll get into more specifically with Deputy Captain Vincent, but the people who just aren't going to show up to those kinds of things, and that how the community board can sort of help close the loop where there are people who might be reluctant to speak directly with folks, but whose direct input we certainly need. So we have still so much work to do in getting caught up on what you guys have already done, and we never want to introduce ideas that contradict or replicate what you guys have already started to aggregate. But all of this information has been so helpful. Thank you again.
Sure, and I appreciate that. I think, when you get to that stage, we're happy, like I said, to provide you any of the stuff that we've already done and what our future plans are. I mean, it's going to be an ongoing conversation. I mean, one of the things that I think we heard pretty clear was there's a lot that we do that people were unaware of that we do, or unaware of that they could come to the police for certain things. So we've really been intentional about it and trying to increase our communication, our outward communication and our inward communication. I mean, every agency communicating with your staff is the key, and making sure that everybody in the building knows what's going on. So we started hosting monthly video chats, and we now have a monthly newsletter. I would encourage you to take a look at that. It's a little long, but we cover the key initiatives, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's really laid out to show the entire Arlington community what's happening in their police department month by month. So, if you can sign up for it to be delivered to your email, but we've been very intentional about trying to increase our communication both internally and externally. We also just published our annual report. It seems like it's late to publish the 2021 report, but our crime stats don't start to finalize till towards the end of March, so it takes time just to be able to get as accurate a crime stats as we can. But that also has a ton of information in it. It's available on our website or through our social media. Okay, moving on. So I mentioned the 4 key initiatives. This is important for me to spend a little time with you. My predecessor, Jay Farr, when he was the chief, introduced 3 key initiatives: crime prevention and control, transportation safety, and community engagement. And last year, we added the 4th key initiative of employee wellness. So I'll go through each one. I mean, crime prevention and control is exactly what it sounds like. It's all our active patrols, our proactive enforcement, our investigative efforts, but it also includes education and prevention strategies. And we just recently had a bunch of Chief Vincent's staff members trained in community policing through environmental design, so we can go out when people request it, do home security surveys, business surveys, and they look at your locks, your shrubbery, your lighting, and make recommendations to help make your property as safe as it can be. So, crime prevention and control is that, both pieces. I mean, we have an obligation to enforce the law, that's part of it, but we also spend a lot of effort in prevention and education strategies too. We're going to talk about crime towards the end of the presentation. Certainly my opinion is Arlington remains a safe place to live, but we are seeing increases in crimes against people, which is concerning. And when you couple that with our reducing staffing numbers, that just adds to our challenges and our workload. But staffing, again, I will get to. Transportation safety are all of our efforts to make sure that our roadways are as safe as they can be for all the different users. I mean, this has been a big change over years. I mean, when I first started here, it was primarily cars, but now it's cars, it's pedestrians, it's bicycles, it's e-scooters and e-bikes, and so there's multimodal modes of transportation. So this is all of our work focused on making our roadways as safe as we can for all parts of our motoring or moving about community. And again, this involves, we take a 2-prong approach to this. It is both education and enforcement. So, if a new stop sign or street sign goes up in Arlington, our first move is to go out and we'll stop people, and it's education based. The goal is compliance. The goal is to modify behavior so that the roadways are as safe as they can be. That doesn't mean that enforcement doesn't have a part of that. It does, but we begin with education before we move to enforcement. One of the things that's new for us in that arena is we recently, last year, we were given or approved by the county board to get traffic safety specialists. And this is going to augment our staff in the special operations section. And these folks are going to be able to alleviate some of the pressures from the patrol officers, and they can help with things like directing traffic. They can write parking tickets. They can help us with some of our multimodal education parts of our work. So this is new. We're going to have 5 specialists and 1 supervisor, and we've got the supervisor on board, and we're working to hire all the individual specialists, but you know, that's still a work in progress. We're also expanding our photo red program. You know, this was one of the recommendations from the police practices group, but we've been in the conversations about expanding photo red for some time. So, you know, we anticipate that going live towards the end of this year, right, Darren?
Yes.
So towards the end of the year, we added several different intersections, still not to the max that Arlington can have, but it is focused on the intersections that are having the most accidents or the most problematic to try to correct behavior to reduce harm to the people using the roadways. We're also working on implementing a photo speed program in our schools. It's only approved by the state law for schools and construction zones for now. So there's been a lot of work. The transportation folks got a grant from the Council of Governments to really study this. We're hoping that sometime within this month or next month, we'll get the results of that, which really was going to focus on best types of technology, best way to deploy it. So when we hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have a functional program that's going to be photo speed enforcement that's limited to just those 2 areas for right now, school zones and construction zones. But that's some of the things that are changing in transportation safety. Community engagement, I think I covered that pretty much thoroughly when I was talking about it before. The one thing I didn't mention is that our community engagement division does partner a lot with other county agencies to make sure that we're addressing the whole of the community concern and not just our part of it. So there's a lot of interactive work that goes on there. And I don't know if you saw, but one of the things we heard loud and clear in the conversations with the chief was from our Latino community really wanting to have more dialogue and interaction with the police department. And we have our first ever Latino liaison officer that began work in October of 2021, really to focus on outreach with that part of our community. Any questions before I move on?
Yeah, I just was going to ask you to repeat the name of the liaison you had. What was that title?
Latino Liaison Officer. It's Corporal Montoya.
That's really great. Thank you for adding that in.
Sure. So here's some of the challenges facing the police department. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because many of these we're going to jump into in detail. Like pay and compensation is not really as much for this board, but you know, recruitment and retention is definitely something I think we need to have a conversation about. The change in crime trends, and I want to talk more about employee wellness. You know, I missed that when I was talking about the key initiatives in the division. So I do want to hit that again before I move on. You know, I've been doing this for 30 years and, you know, I've never seen a time, the last few years have been hard for everybody, but with so much conversation about the law enforcement profession, you know, there's been some added struggles and challenges for a lot of our staff members. And, you know, I've never seen a time that I felt like in this job and in this agency that, you know, wellness needs to be a priority. It's important that we are doing our job to take care of the folks that we're asking to go out and protect and serve the community. So, you know, we're very fortunate in that we've been approved 2 positions to sort of lead up a program throughout the public safety agency. So police, fire, sheriff, and public safety communications and emergency management. So all of the public safety agencies join together, and we're going to have a wellness program that serves all of public safety. And in this FY23 budget, we were approved 2 full-time positions to really help us focus on this and help us make sure that we're providing access to the information and resources that people may need. We don't want to wait until, somebody gets to a place where it's crisis. We want to make sure that information is available to people if and whenever they may need it. We're also incredibly fortunate that, about a year ago, a gentleman called and I talked with him, and he was new to the area, and he works with the Cummings Foundation, and was interested in helping us in this arena. And throughout, a lot of work, the Cummings Foundation has donated significant amounts of time and money to really help us build what would be a national model for wellness. And it's based on data and research, and our staff that participate do surveys and biometric screenings. And it's really aimed at a host of different topics, from physical to mental to financial to exercise, and what's working and what's helping, and it's based on data and feedback, so it can serve as a model for police departments across the United States. So we're incredibly happy with that work that's really helping us move forward.
Is there any documentation from that work so far, or is that just ongoing? It sounds really great.
Not yet. I mean, it rolled out with the initial wellness screening for police. I think it was in March. So it's, the goal, initially the goal was a 6-month program. We're already talking about, we probably got to do it a little bit longer to make sure that we have all the data and feedback. Dr. Baker, who called us and reached out to us, he has an affiliation with a university that is doing a lot of the data analysis and work. So we're incredibly fortunate to have that partnership, and, people who can help us with building the resources and access. We found through surveys of our staff that some of the things that we do aren't well known. So how do we make sure that everybody knows what's available to them? And it's the same conversation we have with the community. How do we make sure that people know everything that's available to them through the police department? So I'm really excited about that work, and I look forward to the results in the next coming months.
Yeah, that sounds really excellent. Thank you.
Sure. I think pretty much everything on the screen, aside from pay and compensation, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with you on that. We're going to talk about in depth, except for the ongoing opioid crisis. I mean, this continues to be, a really dire situation, I think is fair. I mean, we've been tracking opioid-related overdoses and deaths for several years, and last year the numbers were the highest they've been. So we are working in collaboration with the Department of Human Services, and trying to make sure that we do education. So if there's somebody that has an overdose, within the next couple of days, trying to get somebody either from the police department or DHS out to provide information about treatment options, what are available, how can this person get help to avoid becoming or having an overdose that turns lethal. So much work is going into this, and this is not unique to Arlington, it's throughout the region, but it needs to continue to be an area of our focus. Next slide. Staffing and retention. So this picture depicts where we are as an agency as of today, and it shows what's happened over time. Currently, as of today, we're authorized 376 sworn members and about 100 civilian members of the agency. As of today, we have 325 sworn members that currently work for the police department, with 48 to, I think we just went to 48 open positions total. We had a couple of people start this week. So out of the 376, we have 48 positions that are just open, and we have 89 functional vacancies. So it's important for me to explain that. For day-to-day operations, functional means somebody can go out and do police work right now. So the people that are not counted in the functional staffing are people who are waiting to go to the academy, people who are in the academy, people who are in field training, or people who are on light or limited duty. So when we factor that in, our number becomes 89 people short as of today. And this has really created a strain across the agency. Prior to recent years, the average we would lose per year was about 24, 25 people. And that was pretty consistent year after year. So that would mean we'd have 12 people in a recruit class. We have training classes twice a year. One starts in July, one starts in January. So the folks that are about to start the academy in July, they will finish the academy around the holidays, and then they'll go into field training. And then they won't be assigned, if their training goes well, they won't be assigned to be functional police officers until May, June of next year. So the training cycle is the best part of a year, and we try to hire people, at least a month or two in advance of the academy so we can do a lot of training to get them ready to go. But it's an important metric to know that the training takes about a year from start to finish. And when we look at if we were in times 2 or 3 years ago with 24 people leaving a year, that's 12 in an academy class, that would put our functional number somewhere around 340. With having much larger classes now than what we're used to and much larger numbers of departures, instead of 340, our functional number is around 295 somewhere. It moves around in that general area. So I just want to try to paint the picture so it's clear what a challenge this has become for us. In 2018, the police department restructured because of staffing. And this resulted in changing some assignments around, moving people to make sure that we're being as efficient with the number of people that we have. So that was based just on moving some people around. And when we did that, we restructured based on a functional strength of 325 people. So that 289 on your screen has gone up 4 or 5 because we've hired some recruits in the last week to go to the July Academy, but we did restructure for 325. We're currently in the 290s. And what's really an interesting dilemma, it's not a good thing, is, last year we lost 50 people. And that's the highest year that I remember in all my years of service with the police department. And those 50 people accounted for 676 years of law enforcement experience. And that's what we have to be very intentional and focused on. Years ago, it used to be you get promoted or you get a new assignment, and it took time, but you learned your role in time. Well, when we're having that amount of experience leave, our challenge is to make sure we're being very intentional in training our new staff as quickly as we can and providing mentoring and coaching opportunities to get people where they're comfortable as fast as we can, because, we seem to be on pace this year for probably similar numbers. In the last 2-3 years, the last 3 fiscal years, we lost 123 officers and we're only able to hire 107. And that's not for a lack of really committed and dedicated outreach and hiring work and recruitment work. I'm sure you're going to get a presentation from our human resources section who will go into this in depth, but I think we're doing some things that no other agencies are doing to try to really reach out and build relationships with people over periods of time to get them here if we think they'll be a good fit with our agency. What's on your screen now shows our departures for the last 3 years. I mean, I think that's all self-explanatory. I would encourage you to take a look. So the last 3 years have been up from that 25, but 2021 is sort of the standout. And like I said, I think this year we're probably on pace for something similar to 2021, unfortunately.
Can I ask a question about recruitment?
Sure.
What do you think it is? Is it primarily, pay and compensation? I know you weren't going to talk about that, or is it something else? Just the nature of law enforcement, or what do you think it is?
I think
In
it's a
terms of-
combination. I mean, to
Yeah,
be honest,
yeah.
I mean, pay and comp is definitely a part of the conversation because, you know, our starting pay as of today is $57,000 and like $200. But there's other agencies in the region that are at 60, 62. Fortunately, this year in the budget, the county approved a substantial pay increase for all police officers, you know, of 13.5%. And that's a big number. And it also moves our starting salary up to 60,328, I think is the number effective July 1st, with a option for a $3,000 signing bonus. So I think pay and comp is definitely a part of the conversation. I think the pool of people who are interested in being law enforcement has shrunk substantially. And that's definitely an impact. I mean, and I think that the conversation, you know, it's certainly at points about law enforcement generally in the country was negative. And I think that certainly impacts people when they're considering their career choice. Last year, we saw about 1,000 people apply. And of that 1,000, only 300 really interacted with the process. And out of that 300, we only hired 41 people. You know, one thing
Wow.
that's important to us is, you know, our standards and, you know, our background process. So, you know, we're one of a few agencies that require 60 credit hours of college to even be eligible to apply. And, you know, and then the thoroughness of our background and what we're willing to accept and what we're not willing to accept are things that remain important because, you know, we want the right people doing this job in Arlington, and that's an important part of it. The hiring piece is important, just as important as the training piece and the ongoing training piece. So that,
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
what I think.
Chief Penn, I know that you mentioned the 13.5% increase this year. That was frozen for 2 years, right?
Yes, there were
During
no
COVID?
standard merit increases the last 2 years. There was some bonus money, and then I think last year it was 2%. 1% was planned and one was mid-year. So there's been some, but not the traditional merit increases.
So while that's high, it really also may have just caught people up from where they might have been without those freezes amidst a climate of maybe some increased stress.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's other things too, in the budget this year, like our field training officers. One of the things that we were seeing is, you know, there was less interest in that. I mean, it is an increased liability job. It's a ton of paperwork. And, you know, we're trying to hire, the goal is 20 to 25 new officers per academy. We haven't met the goal. I don't think we've ever met the goal of 25. We've been in the 20s, but that means pretty much that those folks train year round. They get little breaks at the end of each session and go right into another session, unless there's some officers whose training's been extended just to, you know, firm up some skills. So that's been a challenge, and that's one of the things that changed this year is the stipend that those officers get was substantially increased. It was like from $1.34 to $3 an hour. So it's substantial because, you know, everything in a career starts in the training. So it was very important to us that we have people who want to train, people that have experience to train. So, you know, that was another thing that I think has been really important in this budget. And to go along with wellness, the manager and board approved and adopted changing our work schedule from 40-hour base weeks to 37.5. So I think that's another important thing that'll help us with morale and well-being, but also recruitment and retention. So there's a lot to that package, but I do think there's competing things that are just the pool of people interested is just smaller than it has been in years past. When I applied, almost everybody got on a waiting list and there was lines to take tests, and it's just not that way today.
Yeah, I'm sorry if my reception is bad, but I actually had a quick question. I heard that Amazon was like people were leaving to go to Amazon and be security guards there. I was just wondering if you could lend any truth to that before if that rumor gets any more legs.
We have had several people leave and go to Amazon. That's true.
Do you have any idea what the comparative pay is for that?
There's multiple different positions. I mean, some are working for Amazon, some are working for contractors. The number, I mean, I don't have exact numbers, but the numbers that I've heard have been substantially higher than
Yeah.
what our pay is. I've never seen the contract, so I know what I've heard, but it is substantially more money in certain areas. And I think, you know, we've lost some folks that have been eligible to retire, so they've done a whole career and gone. But we've also lost some folks who are, you know, 13 years, 15 years, so well into the career, but not at retirement. We're not retirement eligible, I'm sorry.
I also just had one more question. Would you repeat the work week hour changes that you mentioned?
Our standard work week is being reduced for sworn members from the standard 40-hour week to 37 and a half.
Thank you.
Sure. One of the things that we track in our hiring is the diversity of our hires. We consistently look at the last 100 people hired, which, you know, it keeps changing, but, you know, a very positive trend is that our recruitment efforts continue to produce diverse classes that are even more diverse than what the agency currently is. So that's something that I think has gone very well. I mentioned that unfortunately the number of applicants showing up for testing has decreased substantially, you know, the 1,000 to 300 to 41. And we've gotten to a place where we've offered positions and people have chosen to go with other agencies that were at the time paying more or pay more. So, you know, it's a very competitive market right now when there's a qualified person. And most people, honestly, when they apply to several agencies. So it becomes an all-out race to see who can get every part of their process done first and be the first job offer. So it is a very competitive job market. Oh, I thought you were adding something. So pay and compensation is definitely a part of it, but, you know, having opportunity and, you know, taking care of our people is another part of it. I mean, one of the challenges for us now is that we are, you know, we have a lot of overtime. We are meeting our minimums often with overtime, and I'm very mindful of this because, you know, I'll get to it in a minute, but we just recently did service reductions where we're changing the amount of service we provide to the community, which is very hard for this agency because we've always prided ourselves on the level of service. But the truth is we don't currently have the staff to continue to provide some of the services that we were. But the overtime is a challenge because of many of the things that we're doing. I mean, even just to meet minimum staffing, we're often having backfill because in order to keep people, we can't have an environment where there's no hope of opportunity and change and doing a different assignment. So, you know, despite our staffing challenges, we've continued to try to have opportunities, even if they're only temporary, for an officer on patrol to go to CID or investigations for a month or to the organized crime section or the engagement division, because it's important that we continue to give these opportunities to our staff so that they learn new skills and stay energized and motivated about the job and working here in Arlington. So there's multiple things competing with what the balance that we're trying to find. But the overtime challenge for me is one that causes a lot of concern because that's the way it's pretty much going to be for this year. We had 16, 18 new officers finish field training in the spring. And then we have 12 more officers graduating the academy tomorrow. And that's it for 2022. So we won't have any, unless we're able to hire a lateral transfer, like somebody who's already a sworn Virginia officer. That's pretty much what we know we're going to get to additions to our staff this year. So we're spending a lot of time looking at our service, trying to be as efficient as we can, provide the best service we can, and realistic to make sure that we are focusing our efforts on the most significant community concerns, the most significant crimes, and certainly crimes against people and violence.
Chief, that sounds completely spot on. And my question is, do you know what percentage of the officers live in Arlington? My guess is it's pretty low, which I hate to say, but I mean,
what's your guess?
I
10%.
don't know. 10%?
Well, I got to tell you, my information's dated probably about 3 or 4 months, but it was the last time I got numbers, it was right around 30%.
Okay, well, I mean, it's still too low for sure, but yeah, that's one where there's no easy answer to it. The officer I went on the daytime ride along was absolutely fantastic. I mean, he was a model officer, and he told me he lives like up near Baltimore. So I know that's a tough issue.
Yeah, I have and have had officers traveling from the Richmond area, the Front Royal area, Gettysburg. It's not uncommon to have people driving really long distances. And, it is a challenge. And then when you think about the 30%, a fair number of those, and I don't have this number, but a fair number, I'm confident, live in apartments or complexes where they can provide some security services or other work in exchange for a less rent. So, but, it is, in an ideal world, that number would be higher, but recognizing the cost of living, what we see is a lot of our newer officers start in the county, but when they want to get married or have a family, they'll move out and then move pretty substantially out where they can afford
Right.
something.
Right. No, I understand.
So you mentioned our staff, and I didn't start with this, and I should have. We are incredibly unfortunate here, and I think it's important to say, to have exceptional staff. I mean, the time that I've worked here, I just addressed our new folks finishing the academy, and the agency this is and what we provide and how we operate is undoubtedly because of the people that work here. And I just feel so incredibly fortunate to have the staff that we have here. And I just I felt like I needed to add that to the conversation because it's an important part of who we are. Another thing, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, I really appreciate how much you reflect that it's not just the educational standards, but the background clearances and, making sure that you're bringing in folks who can connect with the community values, part of that. What you said before about, a lot of it is about prevention and, best practices, but really, I think hopefully what the Community Oversight Board can help do is reinforce your stated initiative to connect with the sense of community identity, and being able to choose from people is an important part of that. So we really hear what you're saying about the need for, wellness, not just paying compensation, but really holistic retention practices. So thanks for going so deep into that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just had a thought and it just completely left. I hate it when that happens. Oh.
Happens to me all the time. And Amazon's also stealing my workers, so.
I don't think it's coming back, so I'll keep going. With the staffing, I mentioned like 676 years of police service retired or resigned last year. So another thing that is, one of the things that is our work and it's our challenge, and it has, a definite upside is in the time that I've been the acting chief. So that's since September of 20. I've promoted about 55% of our supervisors. And by the end of this year, that number, if we're able to fill all the positions we have, I mean, honestly, we have a handful of supervisory positions that we have not filled because of our staffing levels. But if I were to promote everybody this year that could potentially be promoted to supervisory ranks, that number would climb higher, like 69%. In about a 2-year period. So, having new people in new positions, there's a lot of energy, but, we're all, I'm learning my role. I've been in this job 1 year and I'm still learning this job. So, but I think that goes back to having the staff that we have and the incredible amount of effort and work they put into what we do. So the work, I guess the summation of that is, our work there is really to make sure that we're focused on keeping the staff that we have. and being very intentional and proactive in how we go about recruiting and getting new members to join our agency. The slide that's on your screen now, I didn't hit on, but if you add up some of those numbers, interestingly, last year, about 60% of the people that left the profession. So that's different than in years past. We don't have data from all the years past, but just for being around as long as I have, that's definitely a different situation than what is normal. About crime, I think I mentioned this some. In 2021, overall, there was a slight increase of crime when you put everything together, but crimes against persons are the ones that are of particular concern. That increase of 24% was primarily driven by assaults and aggravated assaults. Those were the two primary drivers of the increase in those crimes. Did you have a question or comment? Oh, okay. I thought I saw your camera going. I thought you had something.
Thank you.
Sure. And crimes against property, they're also up about 7.5%. And the biggest driver in those crimes are, we had some burglary series that occurred last year in which we made arrests, but some of the biggest drivers in that increase were an increase of things like destruction of property. And the crime trend that went down substantially, crimes against society, that is where drug offenses would be categorized. So the change in the status of marijuana is, I think, largely part of that overall reduction, which definitely helped our overall crime number from going up a little more substantially than what it was last year. One of the things that's of concern are the amount of firearms that we've been receiving over the last years. I mean, last year it was 125 firearms that were received compared to 104 the year before. And, a real concern there is 18 of those 125 were these new ghost guns. So there's a lot or an increase in the amount of firearms that officers are encountering and the amount of firearms being used in criminal activity in Arlington. And that is definitely one of our priorities and our areas of focus. But when you look at the chart on the right, our crime remains within the sort of the 5-year norms. But, I think it's, what's guiding our work is where we're seeing these specific increases and being intentional about making sure that our staff, our frontline officers and our investigators, we're left with a choice that we didn't want to make, but we had to make, where we've reduced some responses to certain crimes, and some crimes will be investigated to make sure that we're prioritizing and putting our effort and focus on the crimes that are more serious crimes against people. So I think we can move on to some of the service reductions. This was a few months ago, we announced this, and I got to tell you, this really did not come easy to any of us. It's nothing that any of us wanted to do, because there's a lot of honor in the level of service that's been provided through the years and the great work that the men and women here do. But we were left with a point where there was change that needed to be made because of our staffing levels. So we spent a lot of time with this, got feedback, and the changes that we made they're outlined on your screen. But basically what we did is there's certain crimes to where if there's no need for an immediate on-scene officer presence, that's being pushed to online reporting. It's still a police report, just like any other report, but if the community member files the report online, then it frees up the officer to continue to focus on other areas. But in anticipation of an increase of the work that are online, so our telephone or computer reporting, we anticipated an increase in the work there. So we assigned another full-time position to that unit. And with the goal of everybody who files a report through these means will have some, at least some touch and contact with one of those officers. So every report is reviewed by an officer, many are followed up on, and it goes to the investigation division just like any others, but there's no immediate first line response in a lot of these types of cases. At the same time, we had to look at what was being actively investigated, because one of the areas where we did some more staff reductions was in our specialty units, because, you know, the patrol section has got to be staffed at a level to where 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that there's enough staff there to answer the call for any situations that occur in Arlington or sometimes throughout our region. So we've had to redeploy some positions back to patrol to make that as whole as it can be, to make sure we always maintain that operational readiness, which has further required that we took a hard look at what cases are going to be actively assigned to investigators for follow-up. And we had to make some changes there. I mean, some of the things we really look at are the solvability factors. In some cases, there's thresholds, dollar amounts. I mean, you know, again, nothing that any of us wanted to do, but finding ways where we can still provide a service, but it's not the same level of service. Like it used to be, some of the scams, you know, internet or phone scams would be assigned to a detective. And now we just don't have the capacity to do that anymore, but it's still important. So what we would do when we see like a pattern of scams happening is do social media, make sure that we alert the community to it so that people know it's happening. So, you know, we've been doing this for a few months now. We're still obviously working out some of the bugs, but I think it was absolutely necessary to maintain our focus on the stuff that is more seriously impactful to the entire community. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on?
Yeah, I have one specific use case. I know it sounded like there were a lot of it was a car component. It was the airbags. That an officer mentioned, you know, were being stolen very commonly. And I know like catalytic converters have this problem in California with the Priuses. Is that something that has been migrated to the, you know, online reporting system?
So generally speaking, larcenies from auto, yes.
Okay.
But the things that have not been are the pattern types. So exactly what you mentioned, the catalytic converters, the airbag thefts, those are regional problems. And our investigators work throughout the region with our partner agencies to be proactive in addressing this as a region. So it's important that we continue to have our traditional response to those. And they're still prioritized with the detectives because they're clearly regional and ongoing pattern issues. You know, if the situation where if you go out in the morning and somebody opened your car door and took some change out of your console, those are the types of things now that there would not be an immediate police response. It would be, you'd be directed to, you know, file it online. Either, you know, we have the telephone reporting unit for folks who don't have a computer, don't want to use a computer, or people can do it electronically on their computer at their convenience too.
Chief, do you have a sense that you mentioned that, I'm sorry, Julie, were you finished?
No, I was just saying, thank you.
You mentioned that there was an increase in assaults and aggravated assaults. Do you have a sense of why or what's driving that? And are many of those from Arlington residents as the perpetrators?
Well, I mean, I don't have the numbers off of me, but 2 years ago, we looked at the arrest numbers just generally, and it was high 60s, I think, % of the people who were arrested here in Arlington are not Arlington residents. It might have been 70. It was in that proximity somewhere. The why, I mean, part of the thing I think is important to remember is we're also comparing off of 2020, which is an anomaly in so many different forms of fashion. So, you know, that's why we always look at the 5-year trend, because 2020 was just different.
Right.
And, you know, so, but the fact remains, those numbers are still up even when you look back farther. There's no defined, I mean, the aggravated assaults, truthfully, we've seen more weapons involved in those. And that just the weapon being involved changes the classification of it. For the assaults, you know, we look at where and when, and it's often along the metro corridors, the most popular area, the commercial areas. It's where you would expect. And, we felt like it was important to look, but we're not surprised at, the results of that.
Right. I mean, numbers nationally have gone up for violent crime,
Yeah.
in some places dramatically.
Yep.
And, in part, that may just be the pandemic. I mean, people have been hurt, a lot of people economically during the pandemic, but it's not easy to put your finger on it. I wasn't expecting you'd be able to immediately identify it, but just your thoughts on it are helpful.
Yeah, we do. We have a crime analysis unit that has, 3 folks that this is what they do, is watch for patterns and practices. And if something, is happening in a particular neighborhood, to make sure that, we catch it. These folks really have looked at, spent a lot of time churning the data. But really, it's just, when we looked at the simple assaults, I mean, that can be anything from a punch to a shove to a slap. It really just sort of came back as, the metro corridor and heavily commercialized areas. We look traditionally year after year at, is there incidents of domestic violence going up or down? And that was not a significant contributor to this increase of assaults. So it's non-domestic, it's just generally up, and particularly in the more commercialized parts of the county.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I've seen some things that the Arlington County Police Department is doing to kind of get the message out, like doing the 9 o'clock checks and things like that. Is there anything that the Community Oversight Board, any messaging that you're putting out that we can help to amplify to the community? Or is there any opportunity here for the board to sort of help amplify the messages that you're trying to communicate?
Sure. I mean, we try to be very proactive in, I missed some of what your example of the information was, but generally we try to be very proactive in sharing information with the community, particularly of things that are pattern crimes, because, honestly, this goes back to we're best when we're working in collaboration. I mean, if we keep a community informed of something that's happening in that community, then, instead of just having, 2 or 3 patrol officers riding through periodically, you can have hundreds of people that live there looking for this, whatever it is that generally we're looking for as well. So, keeping people informed is really much effort and focus on that. And the things that we currently use, we're very active on Twitter. We do Facebook, Instagram, and we also are really building our presence in Nextdoor, which is neighborhood specific. And part of Chief Vincent's team, he has staff assigned to different community civic associations to really be that bridge back and forth. And also, we welcome opportunities and invites to go to community meetings and talk about specific incidents, or, generally, if there's a specific incident of concern, we'll certainly address it, but we'll also address generally what's been going on since the last month or 2 months, whenever the last time we were there. And we have a host of community associations that were regular invites, and this is something we're always willing to do. But most of what we push out, we do the platforms I mentioned, in addition to, if things reach a certain level, we'll do an actual press release and push it out through the media. But we also try to promote it or send it out ourselves. So we have those platforms, and then we also have the monthly report that I mentioned to you that we share community-wide, that really talks about what's going on in the last 30 days with the police department.
Thank you.
Sure. So a few more minutes and then we can talk general questions. I talked a lot about our staffing and I talked about Clarendon. A lot of our look is also Arlington going forward. I think it goes without saying that the Crystal City area is going to change pretty substantially over the next couple of years. So, we're in a position now where some of our dispatch technology is due to be upgraded. So we're going to be looking at how we deploy our staff. Currently Arlington's divided up into 10 police beats, and it's time to look at that and see if that's meeting our needs, because we're going to have to restructure where we have staff assigned based on, population growth, crime trends, where the places that are becoming traditionally or historically areas where there's more crime. So this is going to give us an opportunity to look at the method that we actually proactively deploy people, because I think part of our responsibility is to make sure that we look forward into what's going to change and how do we adapt to it to make sure that we're providing the highest quality of service. So much of that will come, over the coming years. I think we've done pretty well with that. One of the challenges that we have in our patrol section is post 9/11, we've taken about 25 to 30 positions out of patrol. And these were all for incredibly important things. But at the end of the day, it becomes a challenge for patrol operating at smaller numbers overall. So some of those positions formed a tactical training unit. In today's world, it's important that our officers have the training and resources and equipment to respond to whatever happens. Years ago, when with Columbine, much of the focus was on, violence in schools, school shootings. Then there's the concept of complex coordinated attacks, which are multiple attacks, in different coordinated areas, to now the potential of terrorism. So our tactical training unit is really focused on, we provide quarterly training to our staff to make sure that we're addressing these things, to make sure that our staff have the knowledge, skills, abilities, and equipment that they may need to respond to whatever might happen here in Arlington. And, this is one of those areas, if something like that happens, I mean, these are types of things that no police department can handle on their own. Nobody's staffed to handle something that big themselves. So much work. We've been very active in the region with, making sure we have regional agreements and cooperation agreements, and how are we going to support each other if something happens. And I think that's an important part of our regular work too, is to make sure, we need to focus, here in Arlington on the Arlington Police Department, Arlington community, but we can't lose sight of our work and our responsibilities throughout the region as well.
Can I ask an opinion-based question for that? I know you mentioned the number of positions approved, and you may not want to comment specifically on how suitable that max number is, and recognizing that there are challenges for growing staff, even from the, retention and retirement and resignation basis. Does it seem to you like, they need to dramatically increase that cap? Is that something that Arlington needs to address as part of the development?
Are you talking about the cap of our number of officers?
Yeah.
At the time, I mean, we had a staffing study in 2016 that we commissioned Northwestern to come and look at our work. I mean, part of policing is an interesting challenge. I mean, fire has it a little more structured and rigid than we do. But in policing, if you want to be effective in the community, the question that the chiefs get asked is, how much unobligated time do you want your staff to have? That's the time that you can go out and do your transportation safety or your engagement, or, look for violations of the law. So, I think the number we gave was 30 minutes of an hour to be unobligated, to go out and do all the things that we're asking to do. Just our key initiatives, why I mentioned those before and didn't finish the thought. Those are things that every member of the agency is expected to contribute to ongoing all the time. Every member, from the newest officer to me, we're expected to focus on those 4 key initiatives and make positive contributions to those things. But, nobody can do it if every minute of their day is book solid. So, when we did that staffing study, and this is pre-Amazon and some of the other changes in our community, they came back with a number of 405. And that was 405. Right, yes, 405. So I think this is part of the long-term conversation. I mean, the short-term conversation is we need to get back to 376, and then we need to continue to grow from there. I mean, as we're recouping and refilling our positions, we have to be really looking to the future. So that's the long term. The short term is we've got to get back to that 376 number.
Okay, that's really helpful and informative. Thanks.
Sure. I think I have covered the general outline I have, so I'm happy now. You can turn that PowerPoint off, Tosh. I'm happy now to answer any questions or discuss anything you would like me to discuss. Or if there's nothing, we can move on.
I feel like the elephant in the room question, as you're talking about that kind of pre Amazon study. Also, I think the elephant in the room is there's like a huge initiative by Arlington County to upzone. It's that missing middle housing, and I was wondering whether the Arlington County Police Department was consulted about that, or what you think the implications of increased density in Arlington would be.
I mean, the increased density in Arlington, I mean, obviously more people can present more and or different challenges. So, I think this is part of the ongoing and broad conversation as we work as hard as we can to get back to that 376. I think we have to be very, mindful and intentional about preparing for the future, because when you take into account, just the training cycle. So from the day we hire somebody, it's about a year, maybe 11 months. That doesn't count the time it takes to go out and recruit them and put them through, the background, the polygraph, the medical psych, all that stuff. So, we don't grow very quickly. It's time consuming for us to grow. So I think it's important that we remain, our crisis now is our staffing. It is our crisis. But we have to remain focused on doing everything we can right now, everything we can. And we're talking about trying to hire back retirees and everything we can do to be successful. But that's the short-term game. The long-term game is to continue looking at where Arlington is now, what we might need to do to catch up if we need to catch up, and then where is Arlington going, and how do we not find ourselves, we don't want to find ourselves in a position where we're substantially behind any kind of growth or change, because it takes forever for us to go from an applicant to a fully trained police officer. So, we spend a lot of our effort and focus on, both the short term and the long term.
Chief, one of the things that has been discussed widely over the last couple of years, including as part of the police practices group to an extent, and was part of a conversation I had during the ride along, was adding people to calls for service with regard to folks who have mental illnesses. And I mean, there's a lot to it. I don't pretend to know all the facts about it, but based on my conversation during the ride along, it seems like, I mean, there is a program in place, and I understand that there have been a number of officers who were trained with the CIT background. And I'm just wondering if you think there is room for real advancement there in terms, and maybe that could impact staffing in a way. I don't know if that's too ambitious, but I mean, have there been real conversations about adding people from DHS, or, I think that might require a whole additional training program. I'm just curious about your view of interacting with folks with mental health. I mean, one of the things that I think we all experienced during the ride along was how much time officers spend, sitting with folks they've brought to Virginia Hospital Center, like entire shifts go by while they're waiting. And that's the way it's set up, and there's no fault of their own, but that's got to be a seemingly, intractable problem. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that issue generally.
Yeah, I mean, when people ask me what are our biggest challenges, it's staffing and mental health. Because you're spot on in that, we have periods of time where, you've seen it. So somebody who's in need of mental health services right now, it's often the police are involved in the initial frontline response to that. Our long-term plan, and this is what the PPG recommended, is what we support and believe in, and we're working with DHS regularly on it, is to move from this model to a model where police only go if there's an articulable threat, and mental health workers would go in lieu of police, but it's going to take time to get there, to go from where we are today to that. So right now, we're reinitiating a co-responder model where we have a mental health clinician who's in ECC, our dispatch center, who can intervene and be a resource when things are happening. I mean, we had that program and then the staff person left, and now it's being reinstituted. So that the stepping stone from the PPG was to go from where we are now to co-responder, where it's police and mental health, to mobile crisis, where it's only police if there's an articulable threat. But this was like a 3-year period was the conversation. Where we are now is with the reduction of number of available state mental health beds. Back in last July, the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health closed many institutions to admissions across Virginia. The law is that those hospitals are to serve as the bed of last resort. If there's no other bed available, then they are the bed of last resort per the code. Their situation is they didn't have the staff to have the beds open. So that's an ongoing challenge. The hospitals have been reopened. I don't think any are currently closed to admission, but the staffing problem that they have has not been solved either. So there's, I forget the number. I think it's high 200s number of beds that are not online because they don't have the staff. So the impact on the locality, and I can only speak to Arlington, is, we have folks that are under an emergency custody order who are going to the hospital, and that's supposed to be an 8-hour process. And that is really for somebody who's exhibiting the signs of mental illness, and they're either homicidal, suicidal, or they're so sick that they're unable to care for themselves at that moment. Then they're detained to be evaluated by a mental health therapist from DHS to determine if they need to be hospitalized for up to 72 hours. That's called a temporary detention order. So the emergency custody often will turn into the temporary detention. And historically, once it goes to a temporary detention, the police were done. That means they were in a hospital and they were getting the care that they needed. The challenge now is there's not beds for a lot of people that need this. So what you see at the hospital are officers there with emergency custody orders, temporary detention orders, and even beyond that. The temporary detention order is up to 72 hours. You have 8 hours for the emergency custody order. And then we were at the point where some folks were going to the court hearing and being hospitalized by the judge, and even into that period. And, the truth of the situation is there's people sitting in the emergency room, on a gurney, restrained by police, who need mental health help, but there's not a bed for them to get that help. So they're not getting what they need. At the same time, you have, we've had as high as 8 people in this scenario at one time. 8's not the norm, but 4 or 5 is not unheard of, unusual. So
that's what it was when I went on the ride along. It was just, in the morning, and I think there were 4 officers there. I mean, I realize there's nothing you can do, and you're focused on it. It's, do you think it's realistic to move to that system in 3 years where primarily DHS personnel, are they moving towards that model? Is that something that they're actively moving towards?
We have regular, monthly, if not more, meetings with DHS about all these topics. Our focus right now is the current crisis that we're in, because, in response to this, like our evening shift is, the minimum is 17 officers. If I take 5 and send them to the hospital, then I don't have what I need to be out available to respond to calls for service. So, in response to that, we've started having overtime shifts, 2 day work, 2 evenings, and a midnight shift to help alleviate this custody of folks who are waiting a mental health bed. And that's incredible. This balances into the work-life balance and how much we're asking our staff to work, and so this is a part of the ongoing conversation. So we've worked extensively with DHS, and the work is nearing completion to where DHS is going to hire private security at the Crisis Intervention Center. And it just got through procurement insurance, so that the long part of the process is over, which is great news. And our goal is for folks who don't need medical treatment, that instead of going to the hospital emergency room, if somebody's under an ECO or TDO, they can go to the Crisis Intervention Center, which is, there's like 5 private rooms. It's not out in the hallway of the hospital. It's a much better environment, and the police can transfer custody of the person to the security officer. That would put the officer back in service, and they're in the building where there's DHS therapists. So we think not perfect, but it's definitely what we're working towards locally to try to make an impact on what has really become a super challenging situation.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to chime in, just note that my family members, like the head psychiatrist from Florida Marin County jail system, and they have like a similar model where the police are empowered to take people to get them mental health support, and it's all integrated so that they're able to actually see a psychiatrist, receive medication. The psychiatrist has visibility on where they've been hospitalized before, what meds they're on, helps them get back onto medication, and actually like can actually help people and help them, put them in job placement, put them in housing. It's like all fully integrated because the police are empowered to sort of like take individuals who are having a mental health crisis to a facility to actually get actual like therapy and counseling and help.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's sort of the vision of what we're talking about at the Crisis Intervention Center. I mean,
yeah.
Initially, the longer term plan for that conversation is to get the resources to where, when somebody does get a bed in a mental health facility, they have to be medically cleared. So, we got to get what I just talked about done so we can have them the people in a better place, and it frees up the officers. And then there's work to where that facility will have the ability to do the medical clearance as well. And DHS does have, psychiatrists and therapists on staff. So the Crisis Intervention Center concept is part of the long-term plan into mobile crisis too. So this work is moving the entire conversation forward and in that direction.
Because there is a spectrum, right, of people. It's not everybody is not going to need hospitalization. Presumably there are some people who could benefit from shorter term, DHS facilitated, I don't know if counseling is the right word, but sort of shorter term, something short of hospitalization that would require a DTO and a law enforcement person to be there. Hopefully, right? I mean, that's the goal, that there would be.
Yeah, we've seen exactly that in having the co-responder sitting in dispatch. That person's available to go out to a scene if needed, or to a home. But that person has also been able to get on the phone with people that call in who are calling in themselves because they're in crisis, and has been able to have the conversation, set up appointments for the next day, create a plan, and has moved that away from a police call to something where that person's been able just to really talk with the person on the phone when they call in the dispatch and make the positive connections and the plan for treatment moving forward. That does not involve a law enforcement response, and it does not involve an ECO or TDO if the person doesn't need that, but it does involve a continuum of follow-up care. So
Yeah,
we've already seen that happening.
And last one on that for me is, are you seeing an increase in the overall number of people with either self-identified mental health issues or diagnosed by professionals? I mean, is that something that's more prevalent now than it was 10 years ago?
I don't have any statistics at all in front of me, and
Yeah,
the DHS would have that, but I can tell you that the amount of ECO, TDO calls that we're doing now is significantly above what we had in years past.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else for me? There's several other speakers coming, so. I enjoyed the opportunity to spend time with you. I'm sure I'll get a chance to see you again. If you think of questions, please feel free to reach out anytime, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you all soon.
Great, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Lisa and Jim, if it's okay, can we take 5 and everybody regroup and come back, and then we'll get you guys finished up with the last group.
Sounds great. Thank
That would be great.
Yep.
Perfect. Back here at 7:40.
Funny, you sounded taller on your video.
Okay, I think 5 minutes is up. The first person we're gonna have is Captain Quigley, who is, our tactical operations section commander. To speak to commitment and dedication, he is currently on vacation. So I thought that was important to mention. Captain Quigley, are you ready?
Oh, I am ready. I was going to say I'm working on initiative number 4, officer wellness, by spending time with my family at the beach. But certainly I am happy to have the opportunity to speak with everybody here today about this section that I command. A quick background on me: I go a little bit further back than Chief Penn. I started with the law enforcement agency in 1988 and was sworn in the city of Harrisonburg in January of 90 and came to Arlington in 1994 as a lateral. And during that time, I was able to work in every division, to include the Office of the Chief with Office of Professional Responsibility. And then since March of 19, I've been assigned as the captain in charge of the Tactical Operations section. Prior to that, as Chief Penn stole a lot of my first 3 minutes of speech when he spoke of it earlier, that the different under the Tactical Operations section had been spread out throughout the department and would follow different people around, and there was no cohesive mission and understanding of how we should approach this specific type. So in March of 19, I was transferred to this section about a year into the creation of it and took over the different parts of it. The current iteration is I have a lieutenant directly responsible to me, as well as the K9 unit, which is 6 full-time handlers and their partners. The ancillary part of the section is just about everything else. So in full complement, we're over 130 people, sworn staff that fill out the chart that you see in front of you, and I'll go through each part of it. For the K9 unit, who are the 6 full-time, these are patrol dogs that are also cross-trained in narcotics detection and explosive ordnance detection. There are 4 part-time dogs that are also explosive ordnance detection dogs that are assigned to the individual squads. We also work with supporting our emotional therapy dog. Brooke seems to get a lot of likes through Instagram, so we like having him part of our group. And then we go through the other parts of this section. The emergency response team is, of course, the special weapons and tactics group, the crisis negotiators, and the tactical operations. The SWAT guys it's the standard group that you always see, that you see running around in the green, that respond to the high threat incidents. The negotiators, which is a special part that I have, because that's where I started my career, was as a crisis negotiator. And then our technical operations is the intelligence arm of the group that provides all of the support so that we can deploy safely and with the best information that we have. The second part of the TAC Op section is the civil disturbance unit, and that responds to crowd management and crowd control issues throughout the county and throughout the region. And then the last is the hazardous incident response team, which is my EOD dogs and my canine group. Also work with the fire department to provide law enforcement specific response to hazardous incidences. The biggest change that we have undertaken over the last 3 years is that every one of these groups is a public safety approach. and that we partner with the fire department and with the sheriff's office to staff these specific emergency response types, and that we realize that if we're going to institute best practices, we need to make sure that we have every stakeholder involved. And as we've seen over the last 3 years and in speaking with the board, we realized that when we were tasked to make sure that we were leading the region in our approach to tactical operations response, that everybody had to be on the same page. And fortunately, it's been very productive. We've been a leader in the regional response. We've been a model for how things get done, how we can be a self-sufficient unit, and have provided assistance across the region with the appropriate response to any type of emergency situation, be it issues with the that have occurred from a crowd management standpoint, or all the way through a high level special weapons and tactics approach. This wouldn't be possible, going back to what the chief has said before, with, our staffing and retention and our recruitment. We get better hires make better decisions, and that makes my job easier. And the divisional support is by far what makes us a standout across the Council of Governments and throughout the nation. We provide support to a large number of people because of the fact that we have a focus on training. We have implemented not only, across the board, monthly, quarterly training, regional training, to make sure that not only are we doing best practices and establishing ourselves as a national model, but that we're predicting issues and we're ahead of the curve so that we can be better. We've been fortunate that we have the support of our electeds, of our executive staff, to make sure that we're doing what we need to do and making it safe for not only the community, but for the officers that are involved. And that we're able to, do what needs to be, whether it's an active shooter threat at schools, which we've dealt with in the recent past, or large scale crowd management when our team went and defended the Capitol on January 6th, and our people stood on the steps and repelled an insurrection and maintained the integrity of the election. And every one of them stood there. I couldn't have been more proud to be with them. And they were able to take care of an issue and come out on the other side with their head held high, and as a model for everyone else in the region. So I know that's short and sweet and to the point. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Well, thank you so much for taking time during vacation. I'm gonna deign to speak for the rest of the, oversight board and saying, we're doing as much as we can to read and learn and, do all kinds of things to absorb as much information. But this direct one-on-one engagement is, by far the most helpful. The ability to ask questions, short and sweet, in some ways is sort of perfect, getting the overview of, you know, how you guys are structured and what your priorities are. So I guess I would ask, I just had a couple questions and then I'm sure others might also, but what is, you know, what's the size of tactical operations? Did you say that?
So currently it's very interesting because I have, there's 8 of us actually full-time assigned to the section. When we respond to an emergency, we can balloon up to 135. That is the ancillary duties that the people that work for me have. So it's certainly a challenge, and it's an interesting challenge that they have primary jobs, they have primary focus that I have to balance with them. I do a lot of meetings with people to beg, borrow, and steal. You know, can I have you here but not there? And that it's worked out very well. I am blessed that I have a lot of peers that understand what we're doing and commit to Chief Penn's vision of what we need to be.
That's very helpful. I'm curious about I mean, not so much just the active shooter, you know, especially at schools. I understand that's just like everything law enforcement, sort of a national target interest of concern. I don't know how much that's, you know, regionally a problem. I'm definitely curious to understand sort of the rise in firearms conversation, but going to the large scale response in the aftermath of January 6th, not dealing with, you know, the hearings ongoing this week at all, but separately, I know there were some concerns expressed over the staging of that in Arlington, especially at some of our hotels and properties where we have, you know, just, I mean, I work in transportation, so we always say no 2 roads are the same, but no 2 hotels are the same. And some of our hotels sort of, you know, are conducive to that privacy. Is that something that's been a specific sort of after action development, or are there other, I mean, as you said, I'm extremely proud that Arlington, you know, was able to mobilize and effectively mobilized to support that. Are there additional needs, I guess, for training to do with that? Or do you feel like, you know, it sounds like you guys have a really robust training program in the aftermath of that? Do you feel like there are additional build outs around that, or is what you guys have? Sorry, I'm asking the same question over and over again.
No, I get that. And the easiest way I would say it is that in order to, you know, kind of balance constitutional rights for everyone, you know, there are only certain things we can do. And we were prepared for whatever was coming our way. And unfortunately, this was something unprecedented and nobody could have predicted. But I am confident that with what we're able to provide in county and what we had set up that day, we would have been able to address any concerns. And as far as, you know, an intel thing, I think we've learned from it. And I think that going forward, we would maybe change some things, you know, maybe be a little bit more alert, but we were certainly in a situation where the easiest way to say is nobody expected that.
Yeah, I think you answered that question better than I could have asked, that you felt prepared for whatever was coming.
Yeah, I have full faith and confidence in my team, and I know that with what the county board provides us, Mark Schwartz and Chief Penn, we're ready to go. And we're, you know, it's just I think the nice thing to know is you have a lot of people that are willing to put their safety on the line for the greater good and protection of the Constitution.
So my last question before I let others chime in is, if that's sort of the, no one could have predicted it, we were prepared and we mobilized and we'll keep learning, but, seems like there's a good system in place around those kinds of unexpected scenarios. What are your typical, common, recurring, maybe Arlington specific challenges?
Not to go back to what was discussed before, but what our current paradigm shift would be is the police response to mental health crises. And we have worked a number of them where traditionally it would have been, you bring out everything and you surround the house and it's this long project and trying to see how we can do things differently and how we can not create a crisis when there isn't one, and how we can reduce a crisis if there is one. And that goes with, my crisis negotiators are some of the best I've ever seen, and their ability to talk to people. And we had one where a woman talked with this gentleman for hours and he was awful to her. Just awful. And she just kept going along and eventually got him to come outside, and we were able to get him the help he needed. And I think that's our biggest, as I said, paradigm shift on how we approach this. We can't do it the same way. And and I know it sounds cliche, but bringing everything together for everything we do, from how we hire to how we train, is making us successful in these situations.
Okay, I lied. I just have one last follow-up question, which is, I think we'll have our work cut out for us to do follow-up engagement with, each group and, figure out what cadence, and we don't want to create a burden on your time more than we are in your vacation. So I'll just ask this in case there's anything, I have heard from the officers I've met and in, different conversations, and certainly reinforced by what Chief Penn said about, the success comes from effective partnership. And I think that, we want to build the new community oversight board into a piece of that partnership. Is there anything that an oversight board as a, liaison or something, are there any identified needs, or is that sort of something that you think we'll uncover in process? Just if you have any direct input or feedback to us. And you can think about it.
Well, I was going to say, if nothing else, it's the communication piece. It's that you understanding what we do and why we do it, and vice versa. And I think that's the biggest part, because then by having the ability to have open conversations where you or I could say something a little on the edge of, like, explain to me why this is, or, whatever reason, I think that will promote a better communication style so that we would be able to move forward, because it certainly seems to me we all want the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. What we have talked about in the communication specific stuff is, how do we build effective bridges? How can we help close gaps? How can we be proactive in communicating about things people can't see, don't understand, misunderstand, or, need to provide additional input on? So that's really helpful. That is actually my last question and comment. I'll let others chime in, but thank you again. You and Chief Penn have been so generous with your time. I'm really grateful.
Certainly.
This is David Smith, and again, I echo what Julie just said. Thank you for talking with us on vacation. And I was going to say, the folks under your command are, in many cases, going to be the folks where, if something could happen, it could happen in any circumstance with any patrol officer, but your folks are the ones who engage in some of the tensest interactions. And, I'm not aware of any, serious issue that's had national, press over the years, and that's a compliment to you. I've had some experience as a prosecutor in the District of Columbia where, you know, folks in the SWAT teams can have performed incredible service in capturing fugitives and others, but also have gone overboard, right? I mean, so kudos to you and my thanks as an Arlington resident that you do the job that you're doing. My question was going to be, and you've sort of talked about it already, which is, without sounding naive, because I know in the SWAT context, de-escalation is not forefront on your mind, but by the same token, first of all, why have your folks been successful in not creating some difficult instance where somebody's gotten shot, and where does de-escalation fit in their training, and how they approach the job? And part of something that you already said about the holistic approach, first of all, hiring the right people, and second, thinking about how to approach situations, sort of taking mental health into account, sound really advanced and spot on. And I just wanted to ask you again, how does de-escalation fit into what you do, and your thoughts on why your group has been successful?
The simplest way would be that I gave them a mandate. Now I'm going to lose years here, but in early 2020, that de-escalation needed to be fully documented in every lesson plan that we were doing, that where it was applicable, and that it needed to be a focal point, and not only that we needed to agree amongst each other that we were talking about it, but in a sense, we needed to show other people. And it was not to be defensive, to be like, look what we're doing. We're doing the buzzwords, but it was, this is important. We need to document the work people look for. And we need to figure out, how does this affect us? And that just because whatever situation had steps 1 through 6 listed, in the lesson plan, if something deviated or could deviate, that maybe, this needed to be something we were aware of. And I have to hand it to my group. Every one of them saw the opportunity to implement it, saw the opportunity to document it, because we were doing a lot of it to begin with, and we just weren't calling it. We were calling it successful resolution, I think was one of the words we used at the time. But we were de-escalating, and we were identifying with the people that were in crisis, or whether it be mental health or any other crisis, but we were identifying with them to figure out, how do we peacefully resolve this? Because universally, nobody wanted it to be a negative outcome. And so that's
yeah,
kind of how we set it up, and so that we could move forward.
Well, and no doubt some of it comes from the top. So again, I appreciate the way you see this and the job that you've done. Thank you.
Certainly. Well, it's my understanding we have other speakers. I'm certainly available offline if anybody would like to speak with me directly. It may be a little delayed for the next couple of days, I'm not going to lie, but certainly we have other people that would love to chat with you, but I am available for anything anybody needs.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we have our operations division patrol section command staff. You have Captain John Fenton and Captain Chris Feltman.
Good evening, everybody. As Captain Chamberlain said, my name is John Fedden. I am one of 2 patrol commanders here at the police department. A little bit about me. I've been a police officer for 28 and a half years. I won't go into all of my assignments and everything, but I can say I've thoroughly enjoyed this profession. I still enjoy coming to work every day. I think it's a calling for a lot of us. And Arlington is, in my opinion, the best police department to work for. So I'll let Chris tell a little bit about himself, and then we'll move into an overview of patrol.
Good evening, guys. I'm Chris Feltman. I am also one of the patrol captains of Patrol Section 2. I've been here about 28 years myself, and been very fortunate to have held a lot of positions in this department, which for the sake of time, I will not get into, but we can always talk at a later time.
Okay, so the patrol section is inside of the operations division here at the police department. And it is broken down into 2 sections, section 1 and section 2. I oversee section 1, Chris oversees section 2, and those names there are what the squads go by. So I have Adam, Charlie, and Echo squads, and Chris has Baker, Delta, and Frank squads.
So as you can see, I'll read it for you, but in the patrol section, there's 2 captains. John and I were responsible for the 3 squads that you saw each. Within those squads, there are 6 lieutenants, which we also call watch commanders, and they're responsible for each squad. There are 18 total sergeants, 3 per squad. One of those sergeants is a first sergeant that can also take on the role of watch commander when a lieutenant is off or unavailable at the moment. Most of the squads are made up of corporals and officers, and that varies what shift it's, whether it's days, evenings, or mids. And our minimum staffing is a total of 132 officers.
So there's a breakdown of our schedule. The day patrol officers start at 5:30 a.m. There's some overlap as the evening patrol starts at 1:30 p.m. and then our midnight patrol comes in at 9 p.m. They all meet initially for a roll call, and then they go out, and they are the men and women that you see out and about driving around in the cars on patrol. Each of those squads, or excuse me, those shifts have minimum staffing numbers. So there are a minimum of 16 officers that work during the day, 17 during the evening hours, and 15 overnight. And this is one of our most popular things here at the police department. As you can see, the schedule, a lot of officers like it because over a 28-day cycle, they'll work 5 days, 10.5-hour shifts. They're off for 4 days straight. They do that again, 5 on, 4 off, and then the third cycle, they work 5 and they're off 5. So they work 15 days out of the 28 and they're off 13. So that's a pretty nice schedule.
So uniforms and equipment, it's certainly evolved since pretty much everybody in this room started. We've made some strides in that. Every employee is assigned to patrol is wearing an identifiable uniform. That uniform has changed several times since I've been here, from a light blue uniform to what you see those of us here on your screen that are wearing now. This one came in about a year ago, give or take, and it seems to be one that everyone likes. It's a little bit darker and resembles more of a traditional police type uniform. The badge and the name tag are displayed prominently on the uniforms and or on the outermost garment if there's rain gear or if it's wintertime and we have jackets or any foul weather gear. The standard color is navy blue, like I said. Canine officers wear olive green uniforms just to differentiate them from us because they do serve a different purpose than we do. Officers on patrol are required to wear the ballistic vest and duty belt. On the belt or the vest, depending on what they choose, at a minimum is a radio, your firearm, handcuffs, a taser, a tourniquet, OC spray, and Narcan.
And something that we implemented over the last couple of years and readily embraced in the spirit of transparency is all officers that are assigned to patrol wear body-worn cameras. And they are out there to record the interactions that we have with the public. mandatory use in patrol by department policy. And we use that video for various purposes. As you see there, evidence in court. It provides an accurate representation of what occurred during a police encounter, and they're also reviewed during administrative investigations.
A little bit more regarding the body-worn cameras. It's important to understand that video is only as good as the technology that supports it, and meaning that it doesn't necessarily capture everything happening due to the finite field of view. So it's mounted on our outermost garment, right about where our heart would be, give or take. So it will only view what, if we're turning left or right, it might not see what's up, it might not see what's down. If we bend down or are looking towards the ground, it's not necessarily going to capture a full picture what our heads might capture. However, there are other officers that are looking from different angles. A lot of times we can piece together a 360-degree idea of what was happening. Body-worn cameras cannot document what the officer is thinking, feeling, or perceiving at that very moment, and that has a lot to do with decision making. So although the cameras are great, we still have to take the human element into account. Overall, speaking with a lot of officers and our feeling from the command staff is that the implementation of the body-worn camera platform has been a positive success within the department and building transparency outside with the community. It helps with accountability and the trust between the police department and the public.
And just something to mention about the body-worn camera. This is just a general overview for you all. You'll have a separate training session on what we call digital evidence management, and they'll go into more depth there about this program that we have. As you see out in the community, officers patrol the county in both unmarked and marked vehicles. We have a mixture of sedans and SUVs. Additionally, the vehicles are all equipped with an in-car camera system, which provides us with additional video of whatever the car can see. Mobile computer and emergency equipment, which includes lights and sirens, and some of them also are equipped with transport cages to transport arrestees. All of our officers regularly train in the emergency vehicle operations and are prepared to safely operate vehicles under stress when the need arises.
So some of the responsibilities of patrol, obviously the basics are to answer calls for service. Call comes in from the citizen, routes its way through our communication center and gets dispatched, and we'll answer it. Once we're there, there's a bunch of different things that can happen, but one of the main things we do is we'll document through report writing, and we'll conduct preliminary investigations. That investigation may actually lead to the conclusion of the call itself. A lot of times we'll document, and then the case will be put into records and sent up to our investigations division to further the investigation itself. Traffic enforcement, obviously we write tickets, both moving violations and parking tickets. Detect and deter criminal activity. When we're out on patrol, we might see us riding around the community. That's part of one of the chief's initiatives. Engage in the community with problem solving through collaboration. Again, the community engagement aspect is another one of the chief's initiatives. And maintain a healthy lifestyle, both physically and mentally. This is something that's come to light over the last couple of years, and the toll that this profession can take on individuals. And we've started to pay much more attention to that and how vital that is to our safety within, which in turn provides better safety for you guys. If we are in a better place personally and professionally, we can provide a better service to the citizens.
I want to just ask or note one thing on that slide, because I think, you know, a lot of what we've talked about in the previous presentations was community engagement. And I think obviously on patrol, the priority is likely answer calls for service. And I'd like to understand some of the things that Chief Penn said more specifically, but I recognize that because there has been a very increased focus and sort of distilled lens on the law enforcement profession generally, that it seems possible to me, if it were my job, that it might be easier to answer calls for service than proactively engage with a community where there are changing attitudes or increased misperceptions about ongoing activity. So I know it will take time to, create a platform for more fully engaged dialogue, but if you guys have any, comments on that or suggestions or input, I'm definitely curious to see what, from a patrol standpoint, can increase officer confidence and community engagement and what makes those scenarios more or less effective. So not necessarily an immediate question, but definitely something I'm interested in understanding more in depth.
Absolutely, we can do that at a later time if it works for you. I know you're going to probably have a presentation from the Community Engagement Division, so they may be prepared to answer those questions. But absolutely, from a patrol standpoint, there is a national narrative with law enforcement and the defund the police movement. I don't necessarily believe that translates to Arlington. I know everyone says that we are cut above, but I've worked with many other law enforcement agencies outside of this county, and we really are better equipped. We are a cut above, and I believe the personnel here are aware of these issues, and I think that's a huge component of this, and that we are willing to be very transparent and open with a dialogue on how we interact with the community. I've been part of the community team for several different stints in my career, and one of the biggest barriers has been the cruiser, and one of my focal points, and John's as well, is to get out and talk. That's how you bridge gaps. You can roll down the window and we can talk through it, but to actually get out and engage with the community is really the foundation of community policing, and we've done a great job of that throughout my 28 years here. Yes, there have been some hurdles in the last 2 years, but I think that we're in a much better position now than we were 2 years ago. COVID definitely kept us from engaging with the community, and the defund the police movement and the narrative that was a national narrative did take a toll on us. We would be remiss not to admit that. However, we are in a position to come out of that now, and I think that the way that we have approached policing my whole career here has continued and will continue, but I'm not going to get too much more into that. I'll leave that for the Community Engagement Division when it's their turn.
Honestly, the biggest barriers is the cruiser is something I would not have known or heard. So that's, even just what you said, is really helpful. I recognize that it's probably a bigger topic for a separate conversation, but I do just want to make sure that it's clear as we build these conversations and build this, that, it will not just be the Community Oversight Board's job to get input from the community, but also from officers that may not fit in a public forum, may not fit, in a report, but that there is a direct opening for you guys to provide that input to us too. So I'm eager to get more of that, but I appreciate your comments.
So when officers leave roll call and they go out to patrol the county, we have it divided up into two sections to start with, north and south. And then each of those sections is subdivided into two more districts that are typically staffed by 4 to 6 officers who are responsible then for covering a beat within the district. So for example, down in Crystal City, we have 48 and 49 beat. And there's at least one officer that's assigned specifically to that area. And then a senior officer, typically a corporal, will also roam between the two to assist as needed. And as you see there, corporals are typically our more senior officers. It's your first level of promotion here at the police department. They are primarily responsible for crime scene management, evidence collection, and then of course mentoring the newer officers.
So I touched a little bit on this regarding the last 2 years of police work, but some of the challenges that we've had, obviously, we're a young department. Many of our officers began their careers during the COVID era, and due to protocols and safety concerns, these officers did not necessarily engage to the extent that they would have normally had it not been for the pandemic. And this is something that we are working our way through, and these officers are almost learning again how to be proactive and engage the community, much like what I spoke about recently. Policing has become reactive in the interest of health. Again, I pointed to that. The department does need some reactive police officers, but the philosophy that we've had at least since '96 has been community policing, and that's where a majority of the police department does proactive community policing work. I still believe that there is some need for a reactive sense, but we're working our way back to getting to most of us doing proactive community policing. And as the bullet point states, we're constantly evolving, adapting, and meeting the needs of the community and expectations of the community. And that is a give and take process. We understand that. I know the community does, and we've always been able to meet the expectations and the challenges that we've been faced with. And I don't see why it would ever stop. And that's what we're here to do.
So with that, that's like I said at the beginning, it's really a general overview of what the patrol section looks like and what we're responsible for. So at this point, we'll open it up for any questions that you all might have, and hopefully we have an answer for you.
Hi, I had a question. This is Sasha. First of all, thanks so much for the presentation. And my question is really about, I see a lot of people like with their Ring cameras and writing down license plates and trying to get, like, because there's just more of these property crimes that people are, observing. Is there actually something helpful that residents can do when they see a crime in process?
Well, I think the best answer to that is that obviously we can't be everywhere at every time. So a lot of times the citizens are our eyes and ears, and that extends to their camera systems. And we routinely, as part of investigations, canvass areas where there's a more high profile crime looking for video. Video has become a very important part of investigations, not only here at ACPD, but in all law enforcement. It's pretty hard nowadays for a criminal not to get captured somewhere, somehow, some way on a video camera if we can find that video. But the overarching thing is, when an officer responds to a call and they're talking to whoever reported it, the more information that person or persons can provide us, particularly specifics, what did the suspect look like? What were they driving? The license? Anything that can give us somewhere to start. It's that collaboration that we talk about in the community, that we can't do it alone. And as Chris mentioned, ever since we started here, I think we were community policing before community policing was a thing. We had a team called the CB POP, which was community-based problem-oriented policing, where we had dedicated teams that worked in various parts of the county that we felt needed more police interaction, and it was highly successful. So we've been doing this for years. And I really feel, at least in my experience, that we've always had a really strong relationship with the community. And when we need the community's help, I think people step up, and you don't sometimes see that in other areas of the country. But that's one of the things that I think is really fantastic here, is that collaboration that I see between the police department and the community.
Thank you so much.
This is Dave Smith. Do you see a need for any training, might not be the right word, but education for the public? And it's sort of similar to maybe what Julie asked, but in terms of the things they report. And I'm just thinking of an incident that got a little bit of notoriety some years ago, where a member of the public reported a black man who was taking photos and put the officer in a difficult spot, who went to the location, and the guy was just taking pictures of a birthday party, but he'd been sitting outside the house, and somebody called the police and said, hey, there's a black guy with a camera taking pictures outside the house. And I think it put the officer in a very sort of awkward position. I think from just looking at what was on the TV, I think he did an excellent job. But I'm just wondering, and that's sort of a community issue a little bit. Is there anything that you've seen in terms of community issues like that that could be addressed by some sort of outreach or training. And I'm wondering if there's any role for the COB in that.
I'm going to let Captain Chamberlain answer part of that question, but I would like to say that one thing to keep in mind is, if I'm correct in the incident you're referring to, is there's going to be times when we are dispatched to a call. So we get a call from a citizen, and we're obligated to go to those. And sometimes, sometimes that can be misconstrued when we get there, or it may not go as planned. But I'll let Captain Chamberlain touch a little bit more on that. But I think that's important to note, is that not every police contact is what we consider proactive. In fact, I would say the majority of we're reacting to a call, a 911 call, somebody flagging us down, somebody calling the non-emergency line. But however we get it, the vast majority, I would say, of our calls are what we consider reactive. So, and then as far as other training, we do, I think, an excellent job of trying to get the word out to people. We provide training on how to respond if you happen to be caught in an active shooter situation, the run, hide, fight, and all that kind of stuff. So we offer a lot of resources. I'm not sure, we do our best to get that out there and to let people know that it exists. But certainly on our website and through our community engagement division, we have all sorts of training that we can provide. We can come and do security checks at people's homes, for example. Somebody can tell you, how to make it a harder target for a burglar or something like that. So there's certainly things that we do regularly and offer constantly to close that gap, so to speak. But as far as the other incident I think you're referring to, let me let Captain Chamberlain speak to that.
So in reference to calls that we respond to, that someone calls in and says something is suspicious, such as in the call that you're referring to, there has to be an act that they can describe to us as being suspicious, so that it's not taken out of context of why we're responding there. So by having the information of what his activity was at that time, that's what would make us respond to said call.
Right. I remember there was something like, there was a concern of him taking pictures of Fort Myers or something that would have been something that might have triggered it. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was ultimately well handled, and just sort of a misconception by the citizen. So I know that you run into all manner of situations, right? Human life is so unpredictable and so varied, and the patrol officers are the ones who see it every day. So, it ultimately does come down, I think, to having good people who have good judgment and good training. And again, I think we're fortunate to have a very professional police department.
Thank you. So we do have one more presentation. It's only a couple slides, and if you guys can just defer any questions you have at the very end for this one, and you may be able to contact him as well to get further information, okay? And this is going to be Captain Albert Kim.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Captain Albert Kim. I get the distinct pleasure of going last, so I'll try to make it as interesting as possible and keep it as brief as possible as I possibly can. I've been at the agency for 22 years. Born in DC, raised in Virginia. 22 years later, I'm sitting here talking to you. So that's pretty much my career in a nutshell. Let me go over the sort of overview of the Special Operations section, and we'll kind of get into the day-to-day of what we do and some of the special duties. So right now, I'm the guy sitting at the top. I'm the Special Operations Section Commander. We have several different units within the section. One we call the Transportation Safety Unit, and that is what I'm going to focus the majority of my talking about, and that's the motor officers, the guys and girls that you see on motorcycles that drive around and do special things on those motorcycles. On the going further down are the public service aides. Those are the people that conduct our parking enforcement. Below that are crossing guards. And then moving through that is our transportation management unit, and then our automated enforcement program. So Captain Chamberlain is cycling through some pictures here right now, so you guys can kind of see what it is that we do. I will just talk briefly about the mission, the overall mission of the Special Operations Section, and that basically is to ensure that transportation safety on Arlington County's public roadways. So what does that mean? That means that we want people that travel along the roadway, either on a vehicle, on a scooter, on a bicycle, walking down on a sidewalk. We want them to be safe. And we're going to do everything possible to make that environment safe for them. We do that in two different ways. One is education. We educate motorists, we educate pedestrians, we educate cyclists on what it is and what behavior is safe. And the other piece to that is enforcement, right? We have to enforce the laws that have been generated by Richmond, by the General Assembly, and those laws exist for a reason. So there's a second piece to that. One piece that really doesn't get talked about that much is planning. Right. So when I talk about transportation safety, I'm going to talk about these three things: education, enforcement, and planning. And you're going to see that planning piece play a particularly important role as we go through some of our special duties. OK, so day to day, what is the day-to-day life of the guys, and I guess the guys that you see standing there in that picture right there with the young lady sitting on the motorcycle? Well, they have a couple of different day-to-day responsibilities. Number one is they're supposed to respond and investigate community-generated transportation safety concerns. So we have a resident that is concerned about the area or the road in front of their house because of speeding, whatever, etc. They're going to generate a complaint that gets brought to us, we'll investigate it, and then we'll deal with it accordingly. That's one of our primary functions. Secondly, we manage and mitigate major traffic disruptions. So if there's a water main break, if there's a road closure somewhere, there's something significant weather related, like 10 feet of snow, we're out there, we're making sure that people can push on through the snow. And I guess this winter we had a really bad snowstorm, and all of my guys were out there sort of trying to get people through Route 50, which was terrible. Traffic enforcement, I already talked about that. Parking enforcement, that's done by parking service aides. Safety at school crossings, those are done by the school crossing guards, both at arrival and dismissal for schools. And then the management of the automated enforcement program, that is our red light camera program, soon to be our speed enforcement or photo speed enforcement program at schools, school crossings, and work zones. So that is the day-to-day stuff that we do. Now let's talk about the special duties that actually, I would say, end up being like more than 70 to 80% of what we have to spend our time on. Number one is funeral escorts. Funeral escorts, they occur regularly throughout the day, or I'm sorry, throughout the week. For instance, if you are a county resident and you have died and you want your loved one to be brought from the funeral home to the cemetery, you will make a request with us and we'll provide an escort to make that environment safe for the people that are following along in that sort of caravan, if you will. Sometimes there's like 20, 30 vehicles involved, and they need to be able to safely travel to the cemetery. Secondly is escort support for our regional law enforcement partners. What you're seeing there is a picture of National Police Week that just occurred in May. That was a national event. What happens is anyone who has died in the line of duty over the last year comes into DC. There's a ceremony for them, and then motor officers and family members come to the area, and they participate in several different events that honor them for their sacrifice. And so you can see us pictured there. This is at Reagan National Airport. We're providing escorts for those individuals that are coming in. Another piece that we do because our proximity to the Pentagon is we do Medal of Honor escorts. The picture that you saw with the young lady that was seated on the motorcycle, her dad was actually receiving a Medal of Honor from President Biden. What happens is we pick them up at the airport, we escort them to the Sheraton Hotel, and then we bring them to the White House to receive that Medal of Honor. And it's obviously the Medal of Honor for a military service member is an incredible honor. And that's his young daughter getting a photo with us on a motorcycle. So we were able to do that for them. We do joint exercises with our other regional partners like Virginia State Police, Pentagon Force Protection Agency. We do POTUS movements. Again, with our proximity to the DC area, whenever the president comes here to visit and it's an on-the-record movement, that the president gets what we like to refer to as a security bubble. That's a full closure of all roadways, overpasses, and then the area around the venue is secured in coordination with the United States Secret Service. As you can imagine, because the president, every time he exits the District of Columbia by vehicle and wants to go, west or south, he's going to travel through Arlington. Arlington basically encompasses the District of Columbia. So if it is an on-the-record movement, we provide assistance for that. Visits to Arlington National Cemetery, if it's an on-the-record movement, then we'll have to provide visits for that assistance with that as well. Protests and rallies that occur here, both planned and unplanned. So if there's a group that wants to protest in Arlington on a roadway, whether it's planned or unplanned, we're going to have to mitigate the traffic issues that surround that. And lastly, probably one of the heaviest lifts that we do are special events. And I saved that for last for a particular reason, because special events, it's just a bear for us to deal with. It is a responsibility for us in our section, and I'm going to just talk briefly now about special events and sort of explain why they're so difficult. So the first thing is, what is a special event? Well, a special event is the festivals that you see in Roslyn, like the Arts Festival in Clarendon, the Jazz Festival in Roslyn, Shocktoberfest in Shirlington. All of you guys, I'm hoping that some of you all have had a chance to participate in some of these community events in Arlington. They happen very frequently during the spring months, the summer months, and in the fall. And then it's also the races. Arlington loves to have 5Ks. So there's a neighborhood 5K basically that's run almost every weekend, sometimes 2 or 3 in the springtime, and then it happens again in the fall. And then we have our parades, like, a neighborhood will want, for instance, I think I have 7 parades lined up, community parades lined up for July 4th. All these are different neighborhoods and communities that have had July 4th parades for many, many years, and then we have to support those things. And then the last thing is the Marine Corps Marathon and the Army 10 Miler, which are Arlington's 2 largest special events. They, again, require massive planning for Marine Corps Marathon planning, which is in the end of October, started in January of this year, and it's now continuing forward. So we are knee deep in Marine Corps Marathon planning, as well as July 4th, which is coming up. How does someone have a special event? Well, that is also a process. Any person can submit an application online. That application was reviewed by the special event committee to include the police department. We either approve or deny the event. 99% of the events are approved. And then the planning piece comes. Once an event is approved and it requires police staffing, that's where we have to try to figure out, okay, what roads do we need to shut down? How many people do we need there, et cetera, et cetera. The larger the event, the more you can imagine, we need to plan for. Some of the challenges surrounding special events is, as you heard this as a common theme, is staffing. Are we going to have enough people to staff the next event that comes up? Marine Corps Marathon, we take in what's called mutual aid. So we'll ask for mutual aid from our regional partners to come in, other law enforcement agencies, to help assist us. Arlington itself puts out about 250 police officers just to staff Marine Corps Marathon. So based on our size, you can do the math, 250 police officers to work Marine Corps Marathon. And that only is a small piece of what we need. So that's why we need to reach out to our regional partners. Planning. I talked about planning before. Planning is a huge challenge with some of these special events. In a perfect security world, we would block every single street. We wouldn't let anyone walk on the sidewalk, and we wouldn't have any spectators, and then we let the participants just do their thing. Well, that's not much of an interactive event. So now I need to balance the security piece with the interactive piece. How do I make the event accessible for people, yet at the same time maintain that security posture? And you're always balancing those things. Residents want to be able to leave their homes during the event. How do I balance that? How do I get this person who wants to exit their home or go shopping or whatever during the middle of this event? Because they have a right to, right? I don't want to hold someone prisoner or hostage inside their home. And then the last and most significant challenge that we're facing coming out of COVID, because COVID, we didn't have many special events, is volume. Right now, because we're coming out of COVID, and you all are seeing this in the leisure industry, everyone wants to have their event, okay? It's been 2 years, I didn't get to have my event. I'm gonna have my event this year. This is gonna be our year. Let's do our event. Well, that's great if only a few people say that and have that mentality. But then when you have the entire, you know, group, all these groups basically having the same idea, then you're getting this high volume of special events. And that's honestly what we're dealing with right now. It's this massive volume coming in because it's pretty much COVID over. I talked very quickly, intentionally to keep it short and brief because I know I was going last. I will certainly open up to any questions that you have. So fire away.
Very thorough. My only question is, which of those special events do you think have grown the most or are the most dynamic? I know the Marine Corps and the Army 10 Mile have been sort of established, but is there any sort of flux in that?
No, they're pretty established, and the Marine Corps Marathon is very templated, so we can go off of what was done in years past as far as the race course is concerned. But any security expert would tell you if you do the same thing every single time, they're gonna figure it out. So honestly, I intentionally tell the person that is in charge of special events now, change it up. If we did something last year, let's do something a little bit different this year. So, because if you've been watching what we've been doing for the last 5 years and you're ready to strike this year, I want it to be just a little bit different where you're scratching your head and it's going to pause and you're going to say to yourself, well, wait a second, this is not what they typically do. We do that specifically with July 4th, and we will continue to do that. July 4th, I didn't mention, but that is another huge event for us. It's the viewing areas. People come into the Arlington to watch the fireworks at the EWO, at the U.S. Marine Corps War Memorial, and then some other very, advantageous sites. Those crowds come in like 15 to 20,000 people. Those are large crowds that come in there, and we are responsible for ensuring their safety and security. And we need to be able to change things up, so it keeps people on their toes.
I actually have a question, and I'm sorry because I know we're running late.
That's okay.
And I haven't asked a question yet, but I was thinking about the Charlottesville Unite the Right event, and one of the things that was so challenging about that, and I'd be interested in how Arlington handles this. Obviously, when you have an event, you have a plan. Everybody has their job. They know where to stand and what to do. Problem with situations like Unite the Right in Charlottesville is that some violent altercations broke out, and because certain police had been stationed in certain places, they didn't do anything about it. And while I understand that if people don't follow their orders, you get chaos, you also get terrible situations like what happened there. So how does Arlington handle that? I mean, you have to tell everybody where to be, but if something unexpected happens, how do you manage to communicate, or what opportunities are given to the police to change the orders they were given? Like, how would you handle that?
So, I mean, I don't want to get into like the actual tactics of what we do. I think there'll be an opportunity for us to further explore your questions. I think it's an interesting question, but I will just keep it general, which is, that is why I said education, enforcement, and then the last piece was planning. So if you plan it right, those types of things you've already incorporated into your plan. Those contingencies, those types of incidents that may or may not occur, you have rolled that into your plan. And so when something like that happens, you are prepared for that. That's part of the planning process. So I'll never make a plan, or I'll never do an event without coming up with 3 different worst case scenarios and be able to respond to that. Because that is part of the planning process that you go through. That is a general answer to your question, but that is the answer to your question.
No, I appreciate that. The contingency planning is so critical, because you see the coverage of what happened at the Unite the Right rally, and you can't help but scratch your head and say, how could that happen? So I really appreciate the answer, and I look forward to learning more at some point. And I don't know, was that the last presentation? I don't want to stop anybody from asking questions, because this has been really fascinating. I haven't been asking questions because I've been taking it all in. And it's been so useful, as so many of the COB members have said. So I don't want to stop anybody from asking questions if anybody has a burning one. Maybe another minute. But not seeing anything. I can't thank you enough. This was so helpful, so interesting, so well laid out. We have a lot to take away from this, and we really look forward to talking with all of you as we continue to move forward and figure out how we can help our police department and our community to work better together, which I think is the only thing that this board really cares about. So again, thank you so much, and I look forward to the next training, and I hope everybody has a great evening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yes, thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.